the beginning of my father's career. His name is David Andrew Wilson. He developed a loudspeaker called the Watt, which is the Wilson Audio Tiny Tot. So it's an acronym shortened to Watt. And he used those as recording monitors. And he was a recording engineer before he was a loudspeaker designer. And so he had a bad experience where he was using the recording monitors that were provided at the studio, and he spent a lot of time and money to record this session. He brought the master tapes home, listened to them on the original WAMs, and it was no good. And so he thought to himself, I need to develop a tool that's going to allow me to hear what I'm recording. And so that was the genesis of him developing the Watt. 5 years later, the Puppy came along, but originally the Watt was just designed for him to carry. The handles were on the back, and so he would carry two of those into the recording studio, and he'd just use them for himself. So think about way back then, 1985, 86, and then fast forward now to 2018. I felt like, and the team also felt like at Wilson Audio, that this would be a beautiful bookend, almost like a harmonious synergy between one of his first commercially successful products and now the first product that's been released since he's passed away. And so instead of calling it a Sasha Series 3, which there's so much different on the DAW that it really didn't make sense to continue the series name, we decided to honor my father and call it the DAW for David Andrew Wilson. I'm really excited about this loudspeaker. There's a lot of very cool things in it, a lot of innovation, a lot of new things. Starting with the top, we have the Convergent Synergy Tweeter Mark V, found in the WAM. It was originally developed for the WAM Master Chronosonic. Also, the 7-inch mid-range is new. It's for this series. It's the same mid-range used in the WAM and in the Alex. And that combination right there put into an enclosure that's been completely redesigned. Over 10% more internal volume in the upper module and more than 13% more internal volume in the woofer cabinet. The woofers themselves are brand new to Wilson Audio. They're a variation of the Alexia Series 2 8-inch woofer. So those are just the drivers. And there's so much more. The cabinet design, how organically beautiful everything comes together. Form follows function at Wilson Audio and in our designs. From the way that the enclosure blends from the woofer to the upper mid-tweet module, I wanted it very smooth and elegant and beautiful and flowing. Now, there's a scientific reason why we have some of the cuts and angles in the side. When you have a panel that's the same thickness from top to bottom, it can start to sing along with the music, right? It gets panel resonances a lot easier. So I wanted to have dissimilar thicknesses in the material in any of the panels that were unbraced. And so if you take and you point at two locations, any two locations on the side of the woofer module or the mid-range, they're different thicknesses. It's very hard for the panel resonances to build up when it's designed and engineered this way. So what that means sonically is that things settle quicker. You're able to hear the space in between the notes better. We believe, and my father always wanted to design loudspeakers that had harmonic expression and dynamic contrast. And something that I'm very focused on is micro detail. And you get the micro detail by designing speakers that get quieter and quieter and quieter. It's very hard when you have, the driver themselves, they're moving and there's lots of vibrations, and it's somewhat violent, really. How do you control that? And the more you control the space around the driver and the environment behind the driver and what the driver's coupled to, the more silence you get in between the notes and the more the notes are preserved for the listener. We're using the larger spike diode system found on the WAM, the Alex, and the Alexia 2. A lot of people have asked about the top blades on the woofer cabinet. Why is it cut out? So the first reason is whenever you have any kind of cavities, pressure builds up in those cavities. And so if you have walls, you can hear that my voice sounds more natural when it's not inside a cavity. And so what we did is we took off the lip off the front from the Series 2, so it breathes better here, and then we put the reliefs on the side of the blades. We learned a lot from the WAM development. The WAM Master Chronosonic was a very fertile ground for us to learn a lot of new things. The gantries on the WAM, the side blades, those are skeletonized and those are open for a reason. And it's a sonic reason, even though it looks cool. There's a sonic reason there. And so we took that knowledge and we implemented it into the Sasha DAW. The second reason is that it's easier to see the numbering on the alignment staircase. And so when setting up the system, it's important that all the modules are all set up accurately. And so being able to look through and see the numbers helps and make sure that the upper modules are aligned correctly. Number 3 is if someone wants to lift the enclosure, it's made out of X material. And it's strong enough to allow, even though the woofer cabinet's very heavy, for someone to grab onto it and to lift it. One more thing that we're very excited about is we developed a brand new binding post for this product. The binding post is much more massive. The contact surface area is bigger, and in our listening experiments, we listened to several different binding posts, including our own and our opponent's binding posts. And what we've designed and developed for this loudspeaker is nothing short of amazing. It really sounds clear, beautiful, and it allows the music signal to pass through the system unimpeded. So going back to the WAM Master Chronosonic, when you look at the way that the WAM Master Chronosonic it adjusts, there's the micrometer system and the platforms that the modules sit on, and those platforms move back and forth. The architecture of those platforms, it looks like metal. And what that is it's metal that's machined out, and then special material is embedded underneath it. So the module, as it sits on top of that structure, it's not touching metal. It's touching the material underneath the metal. And that's for vibration control. We also developed a similar type of vibration control system in the TuneTot and the ISOBase. So we learned a lot from the WAM. That technology trickled down to the TuneTot, into the ISOBase. And what we were able to do with the Sasha DAW is take that concept and shrink it down to where it's not shown to anyone who's observing it, but the benefits are there. So the hardware on the top, you'll notice there are no screws on the top. It's all screwed in from underneath. And the metal isn't touching the woofer cabinet per se. There's a block of material underneath that, and so vibrations have to transmit through the material, through another material that's proprietary underneath there, and then get to the spike track. And so as far as vibration control and what the mid-tweet module is sitting on, we wanted to try to isolate that as much as possible from the vibrations of the woofer. With the Alexia 2, the port system on the back, we learned a lot from Alexia 2, and we wanted to take that knowledge and trickle it into the Sasha DAW. So you'll notice that the port on the back of the woofer is no longer offset to the side. It's centrally located in the back, right in between the woofers. And so there's symmetrical loading of the inside of the enclosure, and that port has been re-engineered to be 50% quieter. Even though it was very quiet before, it's 50% quieter now than it was before. A very cool upgrade in that. Also, when it's centrally located on the back, it's easier for the speakers to be installed in a variety of rooms. It symmetrically loads the room as well. And so if the port is offset to the side, sometimes in certain rooms, that poses a little bit of a problem and a challenge when installing and trying to get the best sound possible. We wanted to remove that obstacle and make it easier for them to be installed in a customer's home. The port on the back of the Sasha Series 2 has been removed and replaced with a vent system. And I had a lot of fun listening to various size vents and dimensions. And it's tuned very well. It's also lower on the enclosure to get closer to centrally located. The vent is lowered on the back of the enclosure to be more in line with the center of the mid-range for better loading of the mid-range enclosure. The evolution of the Watt Puppy series ended on Series 8. And then we needed to push the envelope of what the architecture would provide the customer as far as musical enjoyment. The puppy enclosure was very simple, and we found with other developments during that time frame that we needed to completely redesign that. Same with the upper module. There was a time when the Watt was first introduced, it had its own crossover built into the Watt section. And then when the puppy was introduced in 1989, it had its own crossover installed inside the puppy enclosure, right? So for all of the series of Watt Puppy, you had a crossover in the woofer and you had a crossover in the Watt. We wanted more internal volume for the mid-range to breathe better, and that really helps with mid-range clarity and the three things that I talked about: harmonic expression, dynamic contrast, and micro detail. So we decided with this evolution from the Watt Puppy series to the Sasha series that we'd remove the crossover out of the upper mid-range tweeter module, no longer called the Watt, and install it in the woofer enclosure to allow us to have that internal volume, along with several other design changes. So that's the reason why the Sasha looks so different than the Watt Puppy. Sasha Series 1 carried over the inverted titanium dome tweeter. It also carried over the same woofers, but we had a new mid-range for the enclosure. So we had a lot of design changes for the architecture and the enclosures, but the drivers that came over, there was only one new driver at that point. And then as we do, we're always looking for better components. We're always looking at refining, whether it be capacitors or the architecture of our products, materials research. How do we get the best damped and the quietest material? And then how do you assemble that material in a way that serves the music and serves the customer in the end? And during that time frame, when we had the Sasha Series 1, we were developing the Convergence Energy tweeter. And that Silk Dome tweeter solved a lot of the problems that we'd been hearing back from customers. Customers love how accurate and how detailed the inverted titanium dome tweeter was. Some of the criticisms were, though, in some installations with some equipment, it sounded a little bit bright, and it didn't have the extension, the high frequency extension that people were expecting from a hi-fi system, from a luxury loudspeaker, and most importantly, from a laboratory-grade loudspeaker. So from the Sasha Series 1 to the Sasha Series 2, you'll notice that the tweeter is pointed and directed more in line and on axis with the listener. The Convergence Energy tweeter was a big upgrade from the Sasha Series 1. From the Sasha Series 2 to the DAW, it was a challenging time at Wilson Audio and for me personally. We couldn't just take the system and do a small change. I'm always looking at, and I know my dad always wanted me to push the boundaries of what we could do in loudspeaker design. And so when I was talking with the engineers, and we were all excited about this, we all wanted to show how special this system is. It was a blank sheet approach. It's still a 2-woofer design. It's still one mid-range and one tweeter. And the tweeter and the mid-range are still in a single enclosure. They're still sharing some of the same space, even though the tweeter is sealed. We wanted to look at every single element on the Sasha Series 2 and see how can we refine it and how can we make it better for DAW. To put DAW on the system is a special thing. And so we did everything we could. Everything from the spikes all the way up to the top of the tweeter. Everything from the spikes to the top of the mid-tweeter enclosure. Everything in between was evaluated, assessed, and made better. I'm really excited about this loudspeaker. This really is an amazing loudspeaker. It punches well above its weight. It provides the performance that a discerning, critical listener would come to expect from a loudspeaker this size.